Paris, 1925. Five wealthy scrap metal dealers step out of their gleaming luxury cars in front of the Hôtel de Crillon, one of the most extravagant hotels in all of France. They straighten their ties, clutch their briefcases a little tighter, and stride through golden doors into a private conference room. They believe they're about to become part of history. They believe the French government has summoned them for the opportunity of a lifetime. What they don't know is that they're about to walk straight into one of the boldest scams of the 20th century. At the head of the table sits a man in a perfectly tailored suit, his hair slicked back, his eyes calm and steady, his handshake firm, his government credentials flawless. But here's the truth. Every single word that leaves his mouth is a lie. His name is Victor Lustig, and what he's about to do is so outrageous, so impossibly daring, that even now, almost 100 years later, people still struggle to believe it ever happened. He is about to sell the Eiffel Tower. And here's the part that will break your brain. Not only does he succeed, not only does he escape with a fortune, but when the dust settles, and his victim is far too humiliated to even report the crime, Victor Lustig comes back to Paris and sells the Eiffel Tower again. This is not a legend. This is not an exaggeration. This is the true story of the greatest con artist who ever lived. And by the time we reach the end, you'll find yourself questioning everything you think you know about trust, power, and human psychology. Victor Lustig was born in 1890 in a small town that today is part of the Czech Republic. His childhood, pretty unremarkable, but inside him, something was different. He didn't want to work. He didn't want to follow rules. What he wanted was to win without effort, to live like royalty without ever earning it, and most of all, he wanted to outsmart everyone around him. By his early 20s, he was fluent in 5 languages and had mastered the art of reading people. Lustig could study a stranger for 30 seconds and know their insecurities, their desires, their weaknesses, like he was looking straight into their soul. He launched his career aboard ocean liners crossing the Atlantic. This was the golden age of luxury travel, ships filled with millionaires, aristocrats, and businessmen carrying fortunes in cash. Lustig dressed the part, impeccable suits, flawless manners, and slipped right into the world of first-class passengers. There, he ran elaborate gambling scams. But his most famous invention was something he called the Romanian box, a polished wooden device with gears and slots, which he claimed could duplicate money. He demonstrated, sliding in a crisp $100 bill, waiting 6 long hours, and then pulling out $200 bills. Of course, the machine did nothing. He had simply preloaded it with real bills. But his victims, blinded by greed, paid thousands of dollars for the worthless contraption. They would sit for hours in hotel rooms, waiting for money that would never come. But small cons weren't enough for Victor Lustig. He craved something bigger, something audacious, something that would etch his name into history. And in the spring of 1925, he found his masterpiece. Lustig was sitting in a Paris cafe, sipping his coffee, when his eyes caught a small article buried deep inside the newspaper. At first glance, it looked insignificant, but not to him. The article explained that the Eiffel Tower was in desperate need of repair. Built in 1889 as a temporary structure for the World's Fair, the tower 36 years later was rusting, crumbling, and bleeding money in maintenance costs. Some officials were even questioning if it was worth saving. A few went so far as to suggest tearing it down and selling it for scrap metal. Most people would have read that article, shrugged, and forgotten it within minutes. But Victor Lustig wasn't most people. He saw it differently. He thought to himself, what if I convince someone the government has decided to dismantle the Eiffel Tower? What if I pose as an official, invite scrap metal dealers to bid on it? What if I actually sell the most famous monument in France to someone who thinks they're buying it legally? It was insane. It was impossible. and that's exactly why he knew it would work. Lustig wasted no time. He checked into the Hôtel de Crillon, one of the most luxurious hotels in Paris, instantly wrapping himself in an air of credibility. He had fake government stationery printed with perfect seals. He studied the city's biggest scrap metal dealers, then mailed each of them a confidential letter stamped with authority. The letter explained that, because of financial pressures, the French government had made a painful decision. The Eiffel Tower would be dismantled. The matter was highly sensitive. Secrecy was critical. Only a handful of dealers were being quietly invited to bid. The meeting, of course, would be held at the Hôtel de Crillon. The dealers were stunned, but the letter looked official. The hotel was real, and the opportunity? Too enormous to ignore. All 5 accepted. On the day of the meeting, Lustig played his role flawlessly. He arrived with an accomplice, introduced as a government deputy. He spoke in a calm, serious tone about France's financial troubles. He expressed regret about the tower's demolition but insisted it was inevitable. And then, he pulled off his most brilliant move. He took the dealers on a private tour of the Eiffel Tower itself. He walked them through its iron skeleton, pointed out the rust, spoke about the sheer weight of the structure. He answered every technical question with confidence, as if he had been preparing for years. The dealers were sold. In their minds, they were already calculating profits. But Lustig wasn't, after all 5. He had already singled out his perfect mark, André Poisson. Poisson was ambitious but insecure. He wasn't part of the Paris elite. He was desperate for recognition, desperate to prove himself as a major player. Lustig spotted that hunger instantly, and he knew how to exploit it. After the tour, he pulled Poisson aside for a private chat. Lowering his voice, Lustig confessed. He told Poisson he was just a low-level government official. His salary? Modest. His opportunities? Rare. And then, without ever saying the word, he hinted that a bribe would secure Poisson the contract. And here was the genius. By pretending to be corrupt, Lustig made the scheme feel even more real. Poisson thought to himself, of course a government official would ask for a bribe. That's how the world works. This must be legitimate. Poisson took the bait. He paid the bribe. He handed over the full price for the Eiffel Tower in cash. Lustig shook his hand, promised the paperwork would follow, and vanished. That same day, he boarded a train to Austria, carrying a fortune in his luggage. He waited for the headlines, for police at his door, for word of his arrest. But nothing came. Days passed. Weeks. Still nothing. And then, Lustig understood why. Poisson was too humiliated to report the crime. To admit he had been duped would destroy his career, his reputation, his pride. He stayed silent. The police never even knew. And that was when Victor Lustig made the boldest, most arrogant decision of his criminal life. He decided to sell the Eiffel Tower again. 6 months later, Victor Lustig returned to Paris, and unbelievably, he ran the exact same con all over again. Same forged letters, same luxury hotel, same private tour, same story. But this time, his victim wasn't so easily convinced. Suspicion crept in. The dealer went straight to the police. And Lustig? He barely escaped France before the authorities closed in. He fled across the Atlantic to the United States, where his criminal career stretched on for another decade. He scammed his way across the country, forging checks, manipulating millionaires, running one con after another. He even managed to trick the infamous gangster Al Capone in a daring bluff so clever, Capone ended up respecting him. But eventually, even Victor Lustig's luck ran out. In 1934, he was arrested for counterfeiting and sentenced to 20 years in Alcatraz, the harshest prison in America. And in 1947, he died there, alone, forgotten by the world he once fooled. Yet, his legend never really died. It still lingers. And the question remains, how did he do it? How did one man manage to sell a national monument he didn't even own, not once, but twice? The answer lies in understanding human psychology. Victor Lustig wasn't just a liar. He was a master manipulator who understood three fundamental truths about people. First, people see what they want to see. Those scrap dealers wanted to believe they were getting the deal of a lifetime, so they ignored red flags that should have been impossible to miss. Not one of them verified Lustig's identity. Not one of them called the government directly. They wanted it to be true, so in their minds, it was true. Second, authority is a costume. Lustig knew exactly how to wear it. The perfect suit, the official-looking stationery, the luxury hotel. These surface-level symbols of power were enough to make intelligent, experienced businessmen switch off their critical thinking. We're hardwired to trust authority figures, even when that authority is nothing more than a performance. And third, greed is the greatest vulnerability of all. Lustig never forced anyone to hand over money. He simply dangled an opportunity, then let greed do the heavy lifting. The dealers were so consumed with the fortune they believed they'd make, they never stopped to ask if the deal even made sense. But there's something deeper here. Lustig understood that the biggest cons don't feel like cons. They feel like privilege. He made those dealers feel chosen, like they were part of a secret, exclusive circle. He made them feel like insiders. And once people feel that way, they'll do almost anything to protect it, even ignore the truth, staring them right in the face. You might think a story from 1925 has nothing to do with your life, but you'd be wrong. The techniques Victor Lustig used back then are still being used today in every corner of the world, and often in ways you don't even notice. Every phishing email that promises you a fortune if you just pay a small fee first? That's the Romanian box. Every so-called investment guru on social media, showing off rented cars and borrowed mansions? That's the Eiffel Tower being sold all over again. And every scam that makes you feel special, like you've been chosen, like you're part of some secret, exclusive opportunity that's straight out of Lustig's playbook, updated for the digital age. And it's not just criminals. Advertisers use these techniques. Politicians use them. Anyone who wants to persuade you without you realizing you're being persuaded relies on these very same tricks. The con hasn't disappeared. It's simply become so normalized, we don't even call it a con anymore. So what's the lesson? Trust is a gift, not a default. Authority should be questioned, not assumed. And if something sounds too good to be true, it's not because life is unfair. It's because someone, somewhere, is running a game, and they're counting on you to play along. Victor Lustig sold the Eiffel Tower twice because he understood one final truth. The perfect crime isn't the one that can't be caught. It's the one the victim is too ashamed to admit. And in a world where image matters more than truth, that kind of crime will always succeed. The man who sold the Eiffel Tower is long gone, but his greatest trick is still alive. And it's happening all around you, every single day.